If you have read first year and second year of Classroom the Elite, then you would know there's an exam that seems to always come up, and that is none other than the Deserted Island exam. Both these years have the same kind of exam, but of course there's always something different about them. But in today's video, I'll be simply talking about why I consider the second year island exam to be much more better than first year's island exam. But of course, like always, if you have not been caught up with this series, or you haven't started second year, then you have been warned, because I am going to spoil things that happen in the second year island exam. So with that out of the way, let's just begin. So the first year's island exam was very interesting. I think it gave us an idea that not all special exams were just simply going to be a bunch of written tests and stuff like that. No, obviously there were probably going to be moments near the future in which they were going to be in different locations, and that will be proven true later on in the series, because as you all know, there was an exam that happened during the cruise ship arc, as well as there was an exam that was also happening during the training camp arc. And I think that's one of the highlights of first year's exam, is the fact that it gave us a glimpse as to what's to come next in Classroom the Elite, how there's going to be most likely different locations for a specific type of exam. But with that aside, I think the overall exam in the first year's island exam, I think it was pretty interesting. Basically, the entire point of this exam was that the entire first years, that being class A, B, C, and D, were going to have to compete each other in this island. Not only did they have to survive for an entire week, but they were also given a limited number of points to use for necessities, basically things that they considered that they would need in order to survive in this island. And this becomes very interesting to see, because of course many people have different opinions on what's considered a necessity. You know, there's obviously going to be people that are going to think that some things are more important than other things. Not only that, but there was also VIPs in each class. Basically, there was only one person in each class that was given a VIP card, and if the other classes wanted to, they could guess who the VIP from that class is, and if they guess correctly, they get points for guessing the correct VIP from that class. However, the catch is that if you guess incorrectly, you lose a big number of points as well. So pretty much it's high risk, high reward kind of thing. So overall, based on these rules, it was a very interesting test. Not only did the class have to compete against each other, but they also had to survive for an entire week on this island. And they also had to think carefully as how to use the number of points that they were given. Should they spend it all on survival to make sure they last for the entire week, or should they save some points for it to turn into class points for the next semester? Because that's also one thing that was also mentioned in this island exam. But this wasn't the only highlights of this exam. Not only did we get to see that Ryuin has tricks up his sleeves, which I'm kind of glad, because I feel like people were just simply thought that Ryuin was just this cocky bully who just didn't really know anything. But in this exam, and pretty much in general, I think I'm glad that it showed that while Ryuin is an egotistical person and he's very ruthless, he is not stupid. And in this exam, it proves just how smart he was in this exam. Not only did he make a deal with class A to work together on this exam, but he also sent two people from his class to infiltrate the other classes to see who the other VIPs were. So it was very clear that Ryuin was thinking ahead, and he realized that if he played his cards right, he can dominate this exam. And speaking of classes, let's talk about class D, because this test also highlighted just how much of a mess class D was. I mean, it was already hinted from the beginning, but this just seals the deal that class D in the beginning of the series wasn't great. There was a lot of arguments between everybody in the class as to what they should do in this test. Koenji, being Koenji, decided to bail out of this test like in the very beginning, so they lost a member of their team. And then of course there was that whole underwear incident, which I'm not gonna get into because we're on YouTube. So yeah, there was just a lot of problems with class D in the beginning, and it didn't get better throughout this exam. Throughout this exam, there was somebody that was sabotaging the exam. Now at that point, I didn't know who it was. Some people thought it was Ibuki because that was from class C. And just for some quick info, at that time, Ibuki made up this story that she had a fight with Ryuin, and Ryuin kicked her out of the class, so she was all alone. And class D, being nice, brought her to their group. But of course, people now started to question whether it was a good idea, because clearly there was somebody sabotaging them, and they didn't know if it was Ibuki or somebody from their very own class. This of course leads to the other highlight of this exam, in which we actually got to see Hirata almost have like some sort of breakdown, which I think it was foreshadowing, because looking back now, it was very clear that it was giving us an idea that this wasn't going to be the last time we see Hirata have some sort of breakdown, and this will be proven true during the class voting exam arc. Of course, later on we get that amazing fight between Ibuki and Horikita, showing us that these two are very strong fighters, years and that Horikita can stand her ground. We then get a moment in which Horikita finally realizes that she can't do things on her own and that she's going to need other people to help her out, which once again I think it was foreshadowing of what's to come with Horikita, because she will get one of the best character developments in Classroom the Elite. But of course the biggest highlights of this exam was none other than Ayana Koji, how he was able to beat this exam, how he was able to defeat Ryuen and destroy his plan, because he was very quick to know Ibuki's true intentions in being in Class D. So it was very clear that he was already making a plan as to how to counter her, but at the same time he was also coming up with a plan to win this exam. And towards the end of the exam we find out that Class D actually was first place, which once again shows us that when Ayana Koji is taking things seriously, he is able to dominate any exam, no matter what exam it is. If he's serious about it, he will be able to dominate that certain exam. And of course it was during this same exam as well, towards the end, in which we get the most iconic moment of Class of the Elite, in which Ayana Koji reveals that he only sees people as nothing but tools. So yeah, overall this island exam was very good. I think it clearly shows us that there was more things about the exams in Class of the Elite than just simple written exams. Obviously this kind of exam showed us that there was going to be even more exams like this in the near future of this series. And then moving on to the second year island exam, there is a reason why I consider this exam to be much more better than the first year's, and it's the fact there was a lot of things happening in this just one exam. But first, let's just simply talk about the exam. In my opinion, I think second year's exam was much more interesting than first year's exam because it was a battle royale. Not a battle royale between just Ayana Koji and his classes, no. It was a battle royale between all the years in the high school, meaning it was a competition between first years, second years, and third years. And this exam was much more different than the island exam because instead of working together as a class, you had the options to either work as a group, but with other members of the other classes, or you could also work alone. Now obviously both of these options will have their pros and cons, and pretty much you had to think very carefully as to what you wanted to do. Did you want to go by yourself, or did you want to have people around you to support you? Also, each student in this exam was given a card, which I think was mostly like a power up, in which it will give you like benefits or things you could do during the exam. Now sadly I'm not going to go over all the cards because we be here all day, and some of them are very hard to explain as to what they actually do. But if you want to know more, they're actually in the second year volume 2 of the series. So of course if you want to know more, they're in that volume, because volume 2 of second year was mostly a setup volume for the island exam. So yeah, it was very clear that in second year there was much more interesting things happening in this exam than in the first year exam. And you have to remember, it was during this time that Tsukishiro really wanted to get rid of Ayana Koji, so he pretty much was wanting to make sure that in this exam Ayana Koji got expelled. So he was doing whatever it takes to get Ayana Koji expelled. And you have to remember also that it was during this time where he still had that bounty on his head, in which whoever got to expel Ayana Koji, they get 20 million points. And the classes who were mostly interested in this was none other than the first years. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed this version of the island exam in second year rather than first year, because there was so many things at stake. There was a lot of things that were happening in just this exam, and it was very clear Ayana Koji knew that if he didn't do anything about it, then he was at risk of being expelled. Which it was really cool to see Ayana Koji team up with Sakenaga, because obviously Sakenaga was going to help him out because she doesn't want to see Ayana Koji expelled, because of course, as you all know, she wants to compete with him, which will lead to having these very cool moments between a battle between first year and second years, because it's very clear that both these years have their own goals. First years want to get Ayana Koji expelled, while the second years are trying to make sure that that doesn't happen. And another thing that I enjoyed about this second year island exam was that we finally got to see how Koenji does when he is serious. In the first year we didn't get to see that because he just bailed from the exam in the beginning, so we didn't get to see what he was capable of. But in this year's island exam, the second years, he showed that he was able to dominate everyone, including the entire third year class. And the third years were trying to stop him because he was actually capable of actually winning this island exam. He was actually capable of getting first place in this island exam. Now, of course, the only reason why Koenji was even taking this exam seriously was because he made a deal with Horikita. But even still, the fact that he showed how capable he was into winning this exam, it clearly shows us that when Koenji was serious, he actually was capable of dominating everyone, just like Ayana Koji. And remember when I said there was a battle between first years and second years? Well, there was also fights as well. If you thought that Ibuki versus Horikita was a great fight, in this year's island exam second year, we actually get even more fights with other characters. fighters. There was Nanase versus Ayana Koji, where even though Nanase clearly showed that she had a lot of fighting skills, she was no match for Ayana Koji. There was Ryuen versus Hosen, where even though Hosen had the advantage in terms of height and having more strength than Ryuen, you have to remember that Ryuen loves using dirty tricks, so obviously he used dirty tricks in order to beat Hosen. Then there was Ibuki Horikita versus Ichika, and as you all know, Ichika is a white room student, so obviously she was very good at fighting, and it was really awesome to see just how Ichika was able to actually go up against two people at the same time. But also at the same time, Horikita and Ibuki showed that they were capable of actually going up against Ichika, showing us that they were both very good fighters. And of course, lastly, we had Ayana Koji and Ryuen versus Tsukishiro and Shiba. This fight was very interesting because it goes to show us that even though Tsukishiro was a very skilled fighter, he was still no match for Ayana Koji. And then towards the end of the exam, we find out that Koenji actually managed to be at first place, meaning that it actually not only helped him, but it also helped the entire class have a chance to actually reach Class A. And that is how the second year island exam would end. And overall, this is the reason why I really enjoyed the second year island exam. There was much more action, there was much more things that were at stake in this exam. Sure, first years also had that thing as well, but it wasn't as serious as in second year, because you have to remember, Ayana Koji was literally fighting to make sure that he didn't get expelled from the school. He had to make sure he had to take down not only Tsukishiro, but make sure that the first years were under control. And while there were other moments as well that were huge highlights in this exam as well, like for example, Ichinosu's confession, and also having that situation in which some of Ryuen's classmates were actually seriously injured by somebody, which we will later find out would be Yagami, it was very clear in the second year island exam that the main focus was seeing what Ayana Koji was going to do to deal with his personal problems. So while the first year exam was mainly focusing on what the Class D was going to do to survive the island exam, in second year it showed us what Ayana Koji had to do in order to survive against all the attacks from not just Tsukishiro, but also the first years as well. And that is why I think second year's island exam was much more better than first year's island exam. And with that, that's pretty much the entire video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.